Hey, folks, we're back. And as Alan alluded, we're going to shift gears a little bit, maybe something quite not as serious, but definitely important and profound. There's this thing called the Model Context Protocol created by Anthropic, and it basically provides a bi-directional link for AI agents to communicate and access data. And now we're starting to see this in DevOps. New Relic and CloudBees are both at the forefront of kind of putting together early previews of this. But Alan, we've been around this block for a long time. I think I'm going to see like every vendor on the planet is suddenly going to have an MCP server.
Mike, it's funny. You're not kidding. I think I've already, in this week alone, I've probably done 4 interviews around companies rolling MCPs, not counting New Relic and CloudBees. But what does it point to, right? It points to everybody wants to cash in or at least be perceived as riding the agentic AI wave. And what does it really mean? And I have this problem. Where do we draw the line between agents and APIs? Right? Or do agents now manipulate APIs or master APIs or use APIs? I don't know. But certainly here's an interesting thing. Anthropic floated this MCP protocol, right? And it has become the de facto standard now for agents talking to agents. And that's why everyone's building a MCP into their platform. Now, I see it a lot with the observability players for sure, right? And then so New Relic to me was, with all due respect, a little bit of a me too. I think CloudBees is out ahead. I haven't seen GitLab and maybe so, though I think JFrog has MCP in their stuff. But certainly all of the DevOps players are going to have MCP availability because we spoke in cyber about the cyber story. We were talking about software supply chains and stuff. That's what DevOps is focused on now, the software supply chain, the CI/CD pipeline. And you're gonna have agents and APIs throughout this, and you need that. If MCP is the lingua franca of this, you need to have that built in.
There is this debate about what exactly MCP is, because some people would say it's a variation of an API written in JSON, and and that's what makes it accessible. Other folks say it's something that sits between an API and a full boat connector, and it provides that level of integration. But John Morello, are these going to be like big, fat, new, rich targets for cyber attacks? Because it seems like that would be the first place to go if I was a bad guy.
Well, I mean, I think attackers like always naturally follow like the places where there is the most uncertainty and chaos and churn in organizations, because usually those are the things that are least understood and most susceptible and most frequently changing. And so because of that, there's more opportunities, to find potential weaknesses and vulnerabilities in that. I do think it's interesting in this space that you see almost every new major wave of technology kind of following similar adoption characteristics. And I think about like this is very akin to when containers really started coming out in, the mid 2010s, and people started using them, and everybody, was using Docker, and there was a few other like management frameworks that were like a big deal at the time. You had, DCOS, and you had Docker Swarm, and you had Kubernetes and so forth. But usually in these things, the industry sort of on its own, just as a, free market evolutionary path, tends to converge around one set of standards for manageability when you've got all these kind of like diversity of implementations. Obviously in the container world, it's been Kubernetes. MCP seems to be that around how do you programmatically connect applications to models. But I think the thing that's really interesting about this from a cyber standpoint is everybody, to Alan's point, has rushed to say like, oh, we have an MCP too, right? How high quality that's been done, how rigorous that's, it's been, really threat modeled and tested and thoughtfully built and so forth. I think it'd be wise for people to have some skepticism about that, because to build something that's potentially so complex and sophisticated and enables access to data and resources that are not just complex and high value and sophisticated, but actually can take actions, on their behalf, is kind of a different level of threat than we've really seen before. Like if you think about the securing technology really up until the prevalence of all these AI capabilities that have really become mainstream over the past couple of years, you were typically saying, like, I want to protect access to my data or to computing resources that if an attacker took control of them, they would still have to manipulate and run commands from them and basically act as though they were the owner of that resource. But it was the attacker that was telling the compromised resource what to do. Maybe that to exfiltrate data or to be used as a node in some sort of DOS attack or whatever. You have, for the first time now, though, something I think is really interesting and that none of us really fully understand at this point, which is you can have attackers compromise that MCP layer and potentially, through that access layer, be able to interact with models that can take unknown actions on their behalf. Of course, if they give it a sufficiently detailed and focused prompt, they can control that a lot, but you don't really necessarily know what it's going to do, not in nearly as a deterministic manner as you did in the past. And so I think for everybody in this industry, it's a whole new world of potential risks and threats and scenarios to consider. And frankly, I don't think anybody has really an answer for it, because we haven't seen enough of it in reality to know, like, what does that mean? What are some of the things that people are going to exploit with it? But it's certainly an area that that's going to be very interesting to see how it develops over the next few years, because, like I say, it's really the first time, I think, that a cyber risk could expose potentially open-ended, unknown potential downstream effects beyond what even the attacker themselves intends to do.
Mm-hmm. Terri Robinson, how many days or weeks away are we from the great MCP server
That's
misconfiguration
what I was
crisis?
actually just thinking about. I'd say minutes, Mike. This just creates greater potential for misconfigurations. That's a particular sore spot for me. I don't want to say sore spot, but I get annoyed every time I have to write about a misconfiguration. But I think probably what John says, aggravates that, right? That sort of rush to market or rush to, get these things out there, and then that just makes the possibility of misconfigurations that much higher and that much quicker. I say minutes. I say it's happening as we speak right now.
Let me throw something else out at the panel and take your thoughts on this. Are we rushing MCP? Right? Everybody's talking about agents. Everybody, we're all going to have all of these agents. I've got Agent 86, 99, 07, 007, all of these agents. And we're building these MCPs to handle all of these agents. But are we building like a lot of dark fiber, like Level 3 did in 2001 when the internet boom kind of had died down and we overbuilt capacity? When are we really going to use these MCPs? When are these agents going mainstream? I know everybody, and that may sound, what's the word, treasonous in today's tech world, right? Because we're all about the agents.
Actually, Alan, I very much agree with you, and from the standpoint of, like, I think it's good to have a bit of a reality check and some skepticism on it. I can tell you, it's just being in the venture-backed world for the past decade now, the amount of hype and noise that surrounds anything related to AI today is kind of overwhelming. And the money is flowing to kind of, for you to get any of the money that flows through that VC machine, you have to have some kind of story around AI. I think all of us have used various AIs, particularly like LLM type of implementations, in our daily lives and work lives and so forth. There's amazing stuff that they can do. I mean, I'm not at all downplaying the capabilities of it, but I think that there's also a lot of sort of breathless talk that's probably not really realistic today. You hear, I think the Anthropic CEO had some quote the other day that AI was going to result in like 80% unemployment in 2 years or something like that. There's aspects of this
Yeah,
that,
he
that
said he basically, John. Yeah, basically he said whether it was like half the white collar jobs are going to be lost within 2 to 5 years. But then the caveat always is that they're fundraising right now, so I think he's
yes,
throwing out as much fear as possible, right? And it worked.
exactly. Well, I just think, like, to me at least, I think a lot back to like the very late '90s, early 2000s with the internet itself, where like there was similar predictions, like everything was going to change and so forth, and obviously, like it did. It's like a fundamental innovation in human society. And I think AI is the same thing, but like the idea that that's all going to happen like in the next 2 years, and that like everything just kind of like magically gets solved, and I think it's probably unrealistic. I think much like the internet, you'll see like 10
There'll
years from
be a
now, 5
shakeout.
years from now, even. Yeah, exactly.
Look,
And
I
there'll be
remember
things
in
where
those
it's found it's really
dot-com
good.
John, and you were around then. John, both Johns were around. Terry, Mike, you were too, right? In those .com days, you'd put together a PowerPoint of a business model, and you would claim in the PowerPoint that your present value was $70 million, and you're looking to do a post raise at 100. You've got no revenue, a business plan, and you lose 10 cents on every dollar you do, but you're going to make it up in volume, right? And that model, internet schminternet, it doesn't work. It's against the laws of physics. And I think there's a lot of that same, what did he call it, Alan Greenspan? Irrational exuberance. Irrational exuberance. There's a lot of that going around here too. And part of that exuberance is, let's get an MCP server in here. We'll see. Anyway, we're overtime on this segment too. It seems we're overtime on every segment. You're watching Tech Strong Gang.